Hi, and welcome back to Glassboxed, writing automated RSpec tests. Today we're going to have a look at WebDriver locators for Ruby. We will look at what a locator is, why you would write a locator, what the different types of locators are, and how to actually write all of them. So before we understand what locators are, let me quickly explain what a locator is used for and why you would need to know what a locator is. Well, before we talk about locators, if we have a quick look at this web page where we have various links on various parts of the page. If we look at other pages, we have fields, we have buttons, we have headings, we have text, and so on. To be able to access these particular links or these particular elements on a page, you need to use what are called a locator. A locator basically helps you to A, identify something on a page, and B, be able to use it in a test. So that's effectively the core purpose of a locator and what it is used for and why we use a locator. If I was asked to describe the purpose of a locator in a single sentence, it would be something along the lines of: the purpose of a locator is to help you find some element on a web page and then be able to act on it in a test. So let's begin actually looking at locators in our test. So what I've done, I've already written a really basic test. All it does is it just opens up an empty web browser in Firefox, and then it navigates to the site we were just looking at in the before all method, and then if in the after all method it just quits. So if we just run this just to make sure that it's running, so it's opened the browser and then closed it. So we know our basic test is working. So first of all, what type of locators does WebDriver offer? Well, WebDriver actually offers a lot of locators. The most common one is probably ID and class name. But WebDriver offers many different locators. So let's go through one by one. Before doing that, let's try and actually think of a scenario as well, something that we can actually use. So I think the first thing, well, since we kind of navigate to the home page first, by default, because we navigate to the index page when we navigate to the URL. The first thing we'll do is we'll click on this contact link. The next thing we'll do is, I think we'll probably try and print this heading out. After that, we'll populate this address field. We will then click on the adoption link. After that, we'll click on home, and then after that, we'll click on about. We'll maybe print out this line of text here, and then we'll click on the contact link again. The reason why I'm just going through this, because we'll try and do each one of these clicks or each one of these prints or each one of these interactions with the field using a different type of locator to effectively demo how to use those different locators. So let's begin with the first one. So we said the first thing we want to do is click on the contact link. So if I just inspect this element and see what it has. So the contact link has an ID and it's got a href and a name. So let's go with ID. So what I'm going to do, since I've already got an instance of driver, I'm just going to use that dot find elements, and it's this method here you use to find an element. Find element takes two parameters. The first is whatever you're trying to look for. So since we're trying to fish for an ID, we pass in ID, and then we pass in the value that we want to look for. So in this case it's contact underscore link. So we do that. Now what this will do is this will return the element. So remember, I said the purpose of a locator is to help you find an element and then act on it. So this is effectively the find part of it, or the locate part of it. The act part of it can be done after using the dot, and we can now do something on this. So what I want to do is I want to click this link. So what this is now saying is I'm going to find something on this particular web page, and we navigate to the index page because the first page we go to is effectively the root site. We will look for an attribute of type ID with a value of contact underscore link, and then we'll click on it. So this is find element for an ID. Okay, so let's click on contact. Right. So the next thing we said we'd do is try and print out this contact us. So let's inspect that and see what it has. Okay, so it's got a heading. That's good. It's got contact us. So the problem here is it's only got a tag of H1. It doesn't really have anything else meaningful we can use. And I want to keep this video simple, so let's try and find something else. Let's look at contact form. Okay, so contact form again is a H1 tag, but it's got a class as well. So this looks like a good candidate for using the class locator. So let's do that. What we'll do is, we're using a class this time. We'll say @driver find element, and this time we're trying to find by class. So we'll say class, and the value in class this time was subhead. And all we will do is we'll just get the text. In fact, let's just print out the text, just to ensure that we were able to use this class locator. So the next thing we said we would do is try and access one of these fields. So I think we'll just access this particular field here, the enter address field, and see if it has anything. So it's got an input tag. It is of type input tag. It's got a type attribute. It's got a name attribute. So let's use the name attribute since we haven't used it yet. So for this particular one, this is going to be the name locator. We're going to say driver dot find element by name, and the value we're going to pass is this. And in here we're going to say send keys, and we're just going to send the key dummy text. So I might have looked over this. So this act part that I talked about, where this is the finding of something and this is the act of doing something after finding it. So click means that we will click on this element. So we know this is a link. So after clicking on it, we're expecting to go to the contact page. Text basically gets the text, and here we're doing a puts. So here we're expecting to effectively print out some text. Send keys effectively types in values into whatever we try and use the send keys method on. So in this case we're just going to try and type in dummy text into the address field. Right, so once we've done that, I think the next thing we said we would try and do is, I think it was to click on the adoption link. So right, let's have a look at the adoption link then. So okay, it's got an ID, but we've already used ID. It's got a name, we've already used name. It's got a href. WebDriver doesn't have a locator of href. If we want to do href, we'd need to effectively write a little bit of code ourselves. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the CSS locator instead. So CSS will probably require a little bit of explanation, so I won't go into too much, but CSS effectively allows us to select various things from the HTML source using quick tags. We'll use a CSS selector to identify the ID and the adoption link. So let's do that. So this is going to be a CSS, and we're going to say driver.find elements by CSS, and we need to provide a value here. And the value we're going to provide is, so CSS usually has a couple of different ways of syntactically expressing itself, but we're effectively saying here where ID is equal to I think it's called adoption link, and then we're going to act on that by obviously clicking on it. So here we're saying use the CSS locator and find something on the page which has an ID attribute with a value of adoption link, and then click on it. Okay, so once we've clicked on the adoption link, the next thing I think we said we'd do is try and click on the home link. So okay, let's highlight home. Again, we've used ID, you've used name, we know there's no locator for href, and we've used CSS as well. So because this is a tag or an anchor tag, or if you like a link tag, because it is a link tag, we can use what's called a link locator in WebDriver. So we can now look at a link. So all we'll do is we'll say driver dot find element by link, and the value we're going to push here is the actual text of the link. So in this case is HOME. So we'll just say HOME, and we will try and click on it. Okay, so once we clicked on home, if I remember right, I said the next thing we'll try and do is click on about. So okay, let's have a quick look at about. Yes, similar cases before. We've almost acted on everything here. So what else can we do? Well, similarly to this link locator, WebDriver also provides us with something called a partial link locator. What that basically means is here where we're providing the full text representation of a link, we can provide a partial representation of that link, and it will try and find and click on it, and that's called the partial link. So let's do that. We're just going to say driver.findElements by partial link text, and here we're going to provide in the value. So we want to click on the about, but we don't want to provide the full letters of about, because we want to make sure it works. So if we just provided an A, there's a good chance you might click on the adoption as well, because adoption always also has the letter A in it. But if we said AB, the letters A and B are actually unique amongst all the links on this particular page. So just to be sure, we'll say ABO. That will ensure that the ABO, this particular three letters appearing in that order, don't appear in any other links. So that should potentially click on the about link for us. So we'll just say ABO, and again we'll click on it. So once we've clicked on the about, we have a couple of other locators still left. What we'll do is we'll try and print this message out. So let's inspect this. So this particular message again only has one, well, there's only the tag. It doesn't have any attributes. It doesn't have an ID or a class. There's nothing here really. There's no name attributes. So we're kind of stuck. So yes, we can possibly use CSS. We can't use link because this isn't a link. But WebDriver provides us yet with another locator called the tag name locator. What the tag name locator does, it looks at the name of the tag you're trying to access, and then it acts on it. So in this case, this tag is a p tag, or otherwise known as a paragraph tag. So what we'll basically say is we want to get the paragraph tag, and we'd like to print out whatever the value of the paragraph tag is. So if we have a quick look at this entire source, there's really not a lot here, but the paragraph tag seems to be the only tag on this page, which kind of gives it a little bit of uniqueness in that if we try and print out the paragraph tag, it should only print out this paragraph tag here. It shouldn't print out anything else since there aren't any other paragraphs. So let's do that. So here we're going to try and use the tag name, and we will say, well, since we want to print something out, this puts, and we'll say driver.findElements by tag name, and the tag we want to print out by is called the paragraph tag, and we want to get the text. Okay, so we've actually covered a lot already. We've actually covered relatively quite quickly. We've covered an ID tag, a class tag, name tag, and so on. There's still one other tag we can cover, and that tag, which I assume you guys have probably picked up because it's a really famous tag, is called the XPath tag, or the XPath locator to be more specific. So I think the last thing we said we would do is quite simply just click on the contact link again. So what we need to do is basically identify these contact links, XPath. So if you right click on contact, various browsers have various ways of identifying an XPath. This browser, for instance, is the latest version of Firefox, has a built-in view XPath. So I can actually have a look at that XPath if I want to. You obviously don't have to if you don't want to. XPath is very similar to regex in that it follows a very specific stringed pattern which allows you to kind of drill in deep into your root pages and dig for information. So what I want to do is click on this contact, and I will try and click on the ID of the contact. So what I will do is I'll do a driver find elements. That's not it. And I will find by XPath, and I need to provide some kind of expression, and I will obviously click on it because it's a link again. So the way XPath works is if we do a /, that followed by a star, that effectively means we're looking at the root HTML source, but at the same time we're looking at almost everything. It's another way of saying give me the ability to look at any of the tags on the page in one go. It's not actually very efficient because this, for starters, you're not narrowing your search down, so you're taking a long time to search for something. It's just a couple of milliseconds it takes extra, but it still is a really inefficient way of searching for something using XPath. But that said, this video tutorial is just kind of exposing all of these locators to you to give you a better understanding. So we don't really have to fuss around with what are the best practices of using XPath and why don't you do it this way, why not that way. The focus here is just to give you some insight on what the different locators are. So okay, I said I want to find by ID, so we need to enclose that in square braces, and I want to find by the value of ID. So in XPath, if you want to find the value of ID, you need to provide an @ symbol, ID, and that needs to be equal to and then some value inside that as well. So the value I think we were looking for was contact underscore link. Okay, so we've got various different locators here, but before we kind of talk about these locators, let's just quickly run this test once just to make sure that all the locators are happy. This is just to ensure that there's no kind of syntactical issues or everything is fine, so on. So let's just quickly run this and see what happens. Okay, perfect, it passed. So I was actually not expecting it to pass on the first go. Well, there you go then, fantastic. I was actually expecting maybe I've missed something, but well, the advantage of writing line by line is that it gives a little bit more concentration on what you're writing as opposed to copy pasting. Anyway, back on track. So we looked at the first locator we looked at was the ID, which helped us effectively identify something on a page with an attribute of ID and then a value for that attribute, and then click on it. We then did the same thing, but we looked at class instead. So if you like, the equivalent to class for Java's WebDriver would be class name. We then did the same thing for name, but here instead of clicking on something, we sent some key values to it. We then used the CSS locator to effectively locate something with an attribute of type ID with a value of adoption underscore link, and then click on that as well. We then used link to click on a link with a value of home. Did the same thing for partial link, but this time only passing in a partial link. We then got a tag name locator. We looked for a very specific tag and got the text for it, and then similar to CSS we used XPath, and we got an expression for the XPath and clicked on that contact link. So these are effectively all the locators that you are given when you're writing tests using WebDriver in RSpec, or Ruby to be more specific. Now you've got variations of some of these as well, which do exactly the same thing, but you can have a little bit of variation if you like. Maybe to some of you might make more sense. And the variations lie with class, where you can express this exact same line of code using a slightly different variation of class, and link, where again you can express this exact line of code by using a slightly different variation of link. And the way you do it is like this. So instead of class, you have the option to use class name, and instead of link, you have the option to use link text. Now, from a line-by-line processes point of view, there is no difference between these two lines. They both will do exactly the same thing. This will print out subhead, and this will print out the same subhead again. Here, this will click on home, and once the page is loaded, it will click on home again. So there really is no real difference. So there's no true difference between what this line of code do. The real difference lies in your ability to read this line. To some, this might be more readable. To some, this might be more readable. To some, this might be more less time consuming, and so on. It comes down to preference, if you like. Me personally, I'd probably pick this class name, because it quite boldly tells me you're searching for a class name as opposed to you're searching for a class. But again, anyone could argue they both mean the same thing. And the same thing can be said for link text. So just to make sure they both work, again, we'll just quickly run the test and see what happens. Okay, it was probably difficult to see that the home link was clicked on twice, but this is certain proof that the contact from text was definitely printed out twice. So this was certainly invoked, and this was invoked. Another way of proving that this wasn't a problem was that had it been a problem, an error would have been thrown instead. So in this video, we've effectively looked at all the possible locators that are given to us to play with: ID, class, name, CSS, link, partial link, tag name, and XPath. We've looked at getting these elements and using these elements for different purposes. So for clicking purposes, for printing purposes, sending some information to it, and so on. The focus of this video was purely to give you this, to expose you to all the locators, and I think this is pretty much more than enough to get you started in using these locators, with more complex code and more complex procedures yet to come. And that's it for this video, folks. If you enjoy my video and find they bring you some new knowledge or insight into writing WebDriver RSpec tests, then please subscribe and rate. If you have any questions or video suggestions, then please leave a comment below. Many thanks for watching. Until next time, ciao.